Think you're special, huh? Driving this nice car around at night? Maya calmly met Jessica's glare, her voice quiet but deadly serious. You have no idea who you just put your hands on. Jessica laughed mockingly, dismissing Maya's composed warning. Another entitled woman throwing empty threats. Who exactly are you supposed to be? Maya's eyes narrowed, her tone chillingly confident. Your worst mistake. Officer Malone didn't realize that within minutes she'd learn exactly who she'd disrespected. And her world would change forever. If you believe no one deserves unfair treatment, hit subscribe now and comment below where you're watching from. Officer Jessica Malone drummed her fingers impatiently against the steering wheel of her patrol car, parked along a quiet stretch of road on the outskirts of town. It was late evening, and Jessica thrived on action, often creating problems rather than waiting for legitimate calls. She took pride in asserting her authority, especially in neighborhoods where people of color driving luxury cars were uncommon, at least, in her view. Suddenly, headlights flashed in her rearview mirror. Jessica turned sharply, her attention focused immediately. A sleek black BMW sedan glided gracefully down the empty road, drawing closer. Jessica's eyes narrowed, suspicion fueling her movements. She flicked on her patrol lights, pulling sharply behind the car. The BMW stopped promptly, hazard lights blinking politely. Jessica approached quickly, flashlight glaring into the driver's window. It lowered slowly, revealing Maya Cole, a composed black woman in her mid-30s, her eyes calm and confident. License and registration, Jessica snapped coldly, eyes filled with unnecessary hostility. Maya handed over the documents smoothly. May I ask why I've been stopped, officer? Jessica scowled, scanning Maya's identification briefly, noting, an unfamiliar name. You were speeding and swerved back there. Maya frowned slightly, her tone even. I wasn't speeding, officer. I'm certain. Jessica's expression hardened. Step out of the vehicle. Maya raised an eyebrow, voice calm but firm. Is that necessary? Jessica leaned in aggressively, her voice dripping with contempt. Do it! Now! Slowly, Maya complied, stepping gracefully from the car, revealing her professional attire beneath her tailored jacket. Her composure irritated Jessica further. You been drinking tonight? Jessica demanded. No, Maya replied calmly, maintaining eye contact. I'm completely sober. Jessica scoffed, unconvinced. We'll see about that. Hands on the hood. Maya's eyes narrowed subtly, complying without further protest. Jessica conducted a rough search, finding nothing. Her frustration intensified, as Maya remained composed, refusing to be intimidated. Jessica grabbed Maya's wrists, pulling out her cuffs aggressively. You're coming with me. For what reason? Maya asked calmly, irritation finally seeping into her voice. Resisting, Jessica lied smoothly, smirking. You should have listened the first time. Maya met her eyes, voice steady. Officer, you're arresting the wrong woman tonight. You'll regret this. Jessica laughed arrogantly, pushing Maya roughly toward the patrol car. We'll see who regrets what. As Maya settled into the back seat, her calm never faltered. Officer Malone had unknowingly arrested an undercover FBI agent on assignment, and within moments, Jessica's arrogant mistake would explode into a reality far beyond her control. At the station, Jessica dragged Maya roughly into booking, ignoring the curious stares from other officers. Desk Sergeant Tom Keller eyed Jessica skeptically. What's the charge here, Malone? Jessica sneered. Suspicion of DUI and resisting. Keller glanced doubtfully at Maya, who stood silently, her posture unwavering. You test her? Not yet, Jessica snapped defensively. Maya spoke calmly, her voice carrying quiet authority. I'd suggest contacting Special Agent Daniels at the FBI field office. Jessica rolled her eyes mockingly. FBI, huh? Cute story. But Keller tensed slightly, sensing seriousness in Maya's tone. He discreetly tapped her details into the computer, freezing as the screen flashed an alert. Malone, Keller said uneasily. Maybe you should. Jessica waved him off arrogantly. I've got this handled. Maya exhaled patiently, turning her calm gaze toward Keller. Call the field office, immediately. Keller hesitated briefly, then quickly reached for the phone. Jessica laughed bitterly. Waste your time if you want. Sergeant, she's bluffing. Within seconds, Keller's face paled. He whispered urgently into the phone, glancing nervously toward Maya. Jessica frowned suspiciously, irritation growing. What's going on? Keller hung up abruptly, voice shaking slightly. Malone, Captain Reynolds wants you immediately. Upstairs. Jessica hesitated, suspicion growing stronger. Fine. Watch her. Upstairs, Captain Reynolds waited, expression tight with barely contained fury. Tell me, Malone, who exactly did you just arrest? Jessica stammered briefly. Just some woman? Reynolds interrupted sharply, eyes blazing. That some woman is FBI Special Agent Maya Cole. She's here investigating corruption within our department. Your department. Jessica's face drained of color, realization crashing down painfully. Sir, I didn't know. Exactly, Reynolds snapped. Disgust evident. You're officially suspended pending investigation. Back downstairs, Maya stood calmly as Keller swiftly removed her cuffs, offering a sincere apology. Agent Cole, I'm deeply sorry for Officer Malone's behavior. Maya flexed her wrists gently, meeting Keller's gaze evenly. Officer Malone's actions tonight are exactly why I'm here. Keller nodded respectfully, understanding clearly. What happens now? Maya exhaled calmly, voice resolute. Now, accountability begins. Moments later, Jessica appeared, visibly shaken and stripped of her badge and weapon. Maya's eyes locked onto Jessica's, quiet authority radiating powerfully. I warned you, Officer Malone. Jessica, unable to respond, turned away, humiliated. Maya stood tall, aware that her undercover investigation had just accelerated dramatically, and Officer Malone's arrogance had revealed more truth than either had anticipated. News of Jessica Malone's humiliating mistake spread rapidly throughout the precinct. Whispers filled hallways as officers exchanged shocked glances, realizing an FBI agent had been among them all along, silently gathering evidence of corruption and misconduct. Inside the interrogation room, Maya stood quietly, gathering herself. Her cover had been blown earlier than planned, but the situation had already revealed crucial truths about the department. Captain Reynolds entered, visibly uncomfortable, but maintaining a respectful tone. Agent Cole, Reynolds began cautiously. I sincerely apologize. Officer Malone's actions were completely unacceptable. Maya turned, meeting his eyes steadily. Captain, Malone isn't your only problem. She's a symptom of a much deeper issue. Reynolds sighed deeply, nodding solemnly. I'm aware. We've struggled internally, but I didn't realize it was this severe. Maya approached slowly, her voice calm yet firm. Captain, your officers routinely abuse authority. Malone arrested me simply because she didn't like seeing a black woman driving a luxury car. If I hadn't been FBI, how far would this have gone? Reynolds shifted uneasily. I assure you, Malone will face severe consequences. Maya shook her head gently but firmly. Captain, firing Malone isn't enough. You have officers who stood by silently for years, allowing this misconduct to continue, unchecked. Accountability requires systemic change. Reynolds hesitated, the truth of her words weighing heavily. What exactly do you suggest? An immediate internal audit, Maya responded decisively. FBI oversight, transparent reviews, and a public commitment to reform. Show the community you're serious. Reynolds nodded slowly, accepting her words as necessary. Understood. You have my cooperation. Meanwhile, Officer Malone sat alone in a holding area, stripped of her badge and dignity, her arrogant confidence shattered. Sergeant Keller approached cautiously, voice tinged with disappointment. Jessica, you realize the damage you've caused? Jessica glared bitterly, defiant even now. I was doing my job. Keller shook his head slowly. You targeted someone purely because of prejudice. How many others have you mistreated? Do you understand how badly you've damaged our entire force's credibility? Jessica looked away silently, unwilling or unable to acknowledge the truth. Keller sighed deeply, voice firm, yet saddened. Change is coming, Jessica. You triggered it yourself. Back upstairs, Maya stood with Captain Reynolds as FBI agents entered, preparing to conduct the audit. Reynolds addressed his assembled officers solemnly, his voice heavy yet determined. Effective immediately, this department is under FBI investigation. We will cooperate fully. Anyone implicated will face consequences. Silence filled the room, officers absorbing the gravity of his words. Maya observed calmly, knowing this was only the beginning. Officer Malone's arrogant mistake had indeed unleashed a storm, but one long overdue. In the days following the FBI's arrival, the precinct became a hive of intense scrutiny. Officers spoke in hushed whispers, tension hanging thick in every corridor. The internal audit, led personally by Special Agent Maya Cole, uncovered troubling truths long hidden beneath layers of secrecy and fear. At a packed city council meeting, the public clamored for accountability. The community's frustration had finally reached its boiling point. Maya took the stage calmly, dressed professionally, authority radiating from every step she took. Facing the packed auditorium, she spoke clearly and confidently. My name is Maya Cole, and as many now know, I was undercover to investigate deep-rooted misconduct in this city's police department. A murmur rippled through the crowd, reporters scribbling notes furiously as cameras flashed brightly. A few nights ago, Officer Jessica Malone arrested me based solely on suspicion and prejudice. Had I not been an FBI agent, how differently might things have ended? Maya's voice echoed powerfully through the hall. The crowd fell silent, recognizing the gravity of her words. Officer Malone's behavior was not isolated. It exposed systemic flaws, allowing officers to abuse their authority unchecked. This must stop. A voice rose sharply from the crowd, a woman standing defiantly. My son was wrongly arrested last year. Nothing ever happened to the officer responsible. Maya nodded solemnly, acknowledging her pain. That's why we're here tonight. Accountability is no longer optional. It's mandatory. Every case will be reopened and independently reviewed. The crowd burst into applause, energized by hope that justice might finally prevail. Backstage, Captain Reynolds approached Maya respectfully, his demeanor noticeably humbled. Agent Cole, I understand the depth of this crisis now, but how do we rebuild trust? Maya considered his words carefully. Transparency, genuine reform, and meaningful community engagement. Trust is earned through actions, not empty promises. Reynolds nodded solemnly, resolved to accept her guidance. Meanwhile, at her apartment, Jessica Malone sat alone, watching the live broadcast. She clenched her fists tightly, bitterness gnawing deeply at her pride. She hadn't intended for things to spiral this drastically, but denial prevented her from truly facing her responsibility. Her phone buzzed harshly, messages from former colleagues distancing themselves or condemning her actions. Jessica sank deeper into isolation, forced at last to reckon with the painful reality of her prejudice and abuse of power. Back at the auditorium, Maya's voice resonated with strength. Tonight, we commit to creating a police department worthy of this community. Together, we'll ensure justice becomes the rule, not the exception. As the crowd cheered loudly, Maya knew real change wouldn't come overnight, but for the first time, the path forward was clear. Officer Malone's mistake had become a catalyst, transforming injustice into genuine hope. 3 months later, the precinct that once turned a blind eye to abuse now stood as a symbol of transformation. Thanks to Maya Cole's relentless oversight and the FBI's thorough investigations, multiple officers had been disciplined or removed. But beyond punishment, something deeper had begun: renewal. Inside the newly renovated precinct community hall, officers in uniform sat beside local residents, listening attentively as Maya addressed them one final time before wrapping up her assignment. "When I walked into this building undercover," Maya began, "I didn't expect to be outed so soon. But sometimes, disruption is what change needs." Laughter bubbled from a few officers, now visibly more relaxed than months prior. Captain Reynolds sat in the front row, hands folded, listening closely. Since the audit, he had committed to leading with integrity and compassion. And it showed. Maya continued, her tone sincere. "This department now has mandatory bias training, body cams on every shift, and an internal board that includes community leaders. These are not just policies. They are promises." Applause filled the room. At the back, a teenager raised his hand. "Agent Cole, how do we make sure this kind of abuse never comes back?" Maya smiled. "By staying involved, speaking up, holding each other accountable. Justice doesn't end with one arrest or one investigation. It lives in everyday decisions." After the meeting, Maya stepped outside into the cool evening air. Captain Reynolds caught up with her. "You leaving town tomorrow?" he asked. She nodded. "Back to D.C. My work here is done." Reynolds extended a hand. "You changed this place, Maya. You made us better." She shook his hand firmly. "No, we made it better." Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment across town, Jessica Malone stared out her window. Her hearing with the Civilian Oversight Board was approaching. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing a uniform, and for the first time in her life, she was confronting the person she'd allowed herself to become. She watched the evening news as they aired footage of Maya's farewell speech. Something shifted in Jessica's eyes. Regret? Recognition? The future, for her, remained uncertain. Back in the precinct parking lot, Maya took one last look at the building before sliding into her black SUV. She had arrived in disguise, but she was leaving behind a legacy, proof that justice, even when delayed, could still arrive with power. If Maya's story inspired you, drop a comment below about what accountability means to you. Hit subscribe and ring the notification bell for more stories that expose injustice and celebrate real change. Your voice matters. Let's keep the review movement alive.